Oh, good. Yeah. Yeah. Good to hear the story. Yes.
Where Elder did I? Oh, I guess I told it. Thinking I told it differently to somebody else just recently. And maybe it's the truth. Maybe it was Carol or Heather. But they were both truth in different parts, and that's about
Yeah. Depends on who's listening.
Yeah.
Tell
Yes.
the story a different way. She's doing really well. Yeah, we were just visiting her yesterday, and yeah, she's still walking. And I say, "Do you want to do your physio exercises? Let's go." And then she's like, "Get up." And then she's like, "Can you kick?" She's like, "Yeah." "Can you do barbells?" "Yeah."
Oh,
Yeah. Now let's go for coffee. Yeah. Very encouraging. We're reading Mary Poppins together out loud. She read that to my sister and me when we were small. She's in Priestville. Yeah. It's near Yorkton. Near Yorkton. Yeah. My dad's in a home in Yorkton. And my nephew is a music teacher in Sturgis. So anyway, that group is all in that area. Yeah.
The GPA is full.
Greater Priestville area.
Oh, I was gonna say greater.
Yeah.
Well, Alford, but maybe greater.
Yeah, it's a little further south.
What's her name?
Joan? Yeah, Joan. Yeah.
Yeah, husband of pastor.
Yes, yes. He's retired now too in counseling. But my dad was from Melville, and now everyone is either passed away or moved away. But anyway, he started his career in Yorkton, in the Yorkton Melville. So he's kind of come full circle.
He said he's in a care home.
Yeah, he was in a home in Regina, and I don't know if you remember on the news, Precious Memories. It was a small group home. It was very well run, and he liked it. But they closed very suddenly. They gave all the residents 2 weeks to find a new place. They had financial difficulty. Yeah,
There
so
were 2 homes, 2 or 3 that closed.
around the same time.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was called Precious Memories
On
on 23rd Avenue. It was, yeah, nice. They had a big deck and big trees.
Used to
He liked it there.
On 25th Avenue, just down there.
Yeah, close.
so nice to sit on the balcony there.
And
Deck.
visit or
You know what
have
else
lunch.
now?
It's empty.
It just
Sitting
sits
there.
there. The barbecue is still on the deck and all the chairs and and even the little place where they grew their lettuce.
Even
And
to look across the street and that other home that's right on the corner of, whatever there.
Okay.
Parliament.
Parliament,
It's a
maybe.
nice yard. You just.
Yeah.
It was
there.
Yeah,
No, that's real.
Ray and 23rd. Yeah, it's too bad.
23rd and Alford.
And Ray.
Oh,
Yeah, not far off of Alfred.
that's right. So they even tried to close Luther Care Home.
Yes.
Just around.
That
the
was
same-
happening around the same time. I'm glad the Luther Care Home didn't close, but that made it really hard for people to find a bed in Regina because everyone was looking at once.
End up on it.
So how long?
What was that?
That was a couple of years ago now. Yeah. You mean when it closed?
Ray.
Yeah.
Just
And we get the gold star for perfect.
It was just as kind of tail end, I guess. It was already over. Yeah.
When I say pre-COVID, it's
Yeah.
lockdown.
Yes. Yeah.
As opposed
Yeah.
to still some out there.
Yeah. It was, I mean,
Oh,
when he, yeah, yeah, but you're right. Yeah, it was just the end.
Yeah.
Dylan, you were here for everything except last week.
Oh, I guess it's time to start. We better start.
Yeah, so.
Well,
And after things.
good morning. No, that's all right. We got talking and visiting, which is really good. Forgot what time it was, so I thought we're just here to visit. But welcome to the last class on Palm Sunday. And I've really enjoyed the class. It's just thinking about these stories and poems with this group of people and talking about them, it's really enriched my understanding and appreciation of them. So thank you for that. And I think this is a good way to finish Lent, and then we have Easter next week. Welcome, come on in, we're just starting. So today we're looking at a story by Annie Dillard called Field of Silence. And I'll just open briefly in prayer when everyone's settled. Yeah. Right. Lord, we thank you so much for this day and for thoughts of Palm Sunday and looking forward to Easter. Thank you for guiding us this term, and I pray that you would again accept the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts as we think together and anticipate our celebration of your resurrection. In Christ's name we pray. So Annie Dillard, one of the first reading groups I was ever part of was established by this church by a former minister, Cam Yates, and a good friend of mine, Daniel Coleman, who was ahead of me in the graduate English program at the university. And the first book we read together was Annie Dillard. And anyway, we read Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. Anyone ever read that? I think that's her best known work. Okay. Where she does a lot of meditations about nature. And Tim and I even went to Tinker Creek.
We did a pilgrimage to Tinker.
Yes, we did.
And it looked remarkably like Wascana Creek.
I was quite surprised.
I was shocked.
I thought she was out in the wilderness somewhere, and writing about nature, but it was very suburban, and there were even Canada geese on this little creek.
Yeah.
It was not far from the college she went to, I think,
Collins
College. So it was a place that she would journal and things like
I think
that.
she was further up the creek and we're
Probably.
in the woods somewhere.
Maybe not quite where we were walking, but close. Anyway, I thought, well, I feel surprisingly at home here in, that was Roanoke, was it?
Yeah, Roanoke, Virginia.
Yeah. So anyway, that was my taste of Annie Dillard. And she's a contemporary American writer. I thought it's nice that we started with the metaphysical poets, and now we have someone who's contemporary and still aware of that tradition and drawing on it in some ways. And writing personal essays in this case. So she has written poetry. She's written lots of personal essays and memoirs, including An American Childhood. Anyway, she's best known for Pilgrim at Tinker Creek that won a Pulitzer Prize. And it contains many reflections on nature. So you'll see a similarity between this story and that, if you've read that. This is from a work called Teaching a Stone to Talk. But it reads very much like a journal and personal reflections. She said that she's really just a wanderer, a wayfarer on the earth with a background in theology and a penchant for quirky facts. So that's kind of the way she writes. And she gives a lot of reflections. They read a lot like meditations. Sometimes they have a kind of urgency about seeing and seeing beneath the surface of things. So she really draws out a sense of wonder, which I thought is a good place maybe to end in Lent and prepare for Easter. So this particular essay that she writes, A Field of Silence, she starts at the beginning mentioning a lot of images that seem to stress silence. So that sort of quiet space, quieting. She was living in the Gulf Islands at this particular time that she was writing. So when I picture a farm, I think a prairie farm, but it's kind of a cooperative farm in the Gulf Islands, not far from Vancouver Island, but on the American side of the Gulf Islands. But still, a farm is a farm, it's a rural setting, and so somewhat familiar. And she starts with the idea of loneliness. So I thought we would just keep that in mind and just look at the bottom of 102. And just, well, I should read through the whole thing. It's short again, and then we'll think of all the words as we go along that suggest loneliness or quiet. So 102, I'll start at the top. She says, there is a place called the farm where I lived once in a time that was very lonely. Fortunately, I was unconscious of my loneliness then and felt it only deeply, bewildered, in the half-bright way that a puppy feels pain. I loved the place and still do. It was an ordinary farm, a calf-raising, haymaking farm, and very beautiful. Its flat, messy pastures ran along one side of the central portion of a quarter-mile road in the central part of an island in Puget Sound on the Washington coast. Good morning. So that from the high end of the road, you could look west toward the Pacific, to the Sound and its 100 islands. And from the other end, and from the farm, you could see east to the water between you and the mainland. And beyond it, the mainland's mountains, slicked with snow. I liked the clutter about the place, the way everything blossomed, or seeded, or rusted. I liked the 100 half-finished projects, the smells, and the way the animals broke loose. It's calming to herd animals. Often, a regular rodeo breaks out. 2 people and a clever cow can kill a morning, but still, it is calming. You laugh for a while, exhausted, and silence is restored. The beasts are back in their pastures. The fences are not fixed, but disguised as if they were fixed, ensuring the animals' temporary resignation, and a great calm descends, a lack of urgency, a sense of having to invent something to do, until the next time you must run and chase the cattle. The farm seemed eternal in the crude way the earth does, extending, that is, from a very long time. The farm was as old as earth, always there, as old as the island, the Platonic form of farm, of human society itself, a piece of land, eaten and replenished a billion summers, a piece of land worked on, lived on, grown over, plowed under, and stitched again and again, with fingers or with leaves, in and out and into human life's thin weave. I lived there once. I lived there once, and I've seen from behind the barn the long roadside pastures, heaped with silence. Behind the rooster suddenly, I saw the silence heaped on the fields like trays. That day, the green hayfields supported silence, evenly sown. The fields bent just so, under the even pressure did not buckle beneath the heel of silence, nor split up scattered to bits, but instead lay secret, disguised as time and matter, as though that were nothing ordinary. Nothing ordinary, disguised as fields like those which bear the silence only because they are spread, and the silence spreads over them, great in size. I do not want, I think, ever to see such a sight again. That there is loneliness here I had granted, in the abstract, but not, I thought, inside the light of God's presence, inside his sanction, and signed by his name. I lived alone in the farmhouse and rented. The owners in their 20s lived in another building just over the yard. I'd been reading and restless for 2 or 3 days. It was morning. I'd just read at breakfast an Updike story, packed dirt, church going, a dying cat, traded car. Which moved me. I heard our own farmyard rooster and 2 or 3 roosters across the street screeching. I quit the house, hoping at heart to see either of the owners, but immediately to watch our rooster as he crowed. It was Saturday morning, late in the summer, in early September, clear-aired and still. I climbed the barnyard fence between the poultry and the pastures. I watched the red rooster, and the rooster reptilian kept one alert and alien eye on me. He pulled his extravagant neck to its maximum length, hauled himself high on his legs, stretched his beak as if he were gagging, screamed, and blinked. It was a ruckus. The din came from everywhere, and only the most rigorous application of reason could persuade me that it proceeded in its entirety from this lone and maniac bird. After a pause, the roosters across the street started, answering the proclamation or cranking out another round, arrhythmically interrupting. In the same way, there is no pattern nor sense to the massed stridulations of cicadas. Their skipped beats, enjambments, and failed alterations jangle your spirits. As though each of those 1,000 insects, each with identical feelings, were stubbornly deaf to the others, and loudly alone. I shifted along the fence to see if either of the owners was coming or going. To the rooster, I said nothing, but only stared. And he stared at me. We were both careful to keep the wooden fence flat from our line of sight, so that his profiled eye and my 2 eyes could meet. From time to time, I looked beyond the pastures to learn if anyone might be seen on the road. When I was turned away in this manner, the silence gathered and struck me. It bashed me broadside from the heavens above me, like yard goods. 10 acres of fallen, invisible sky choked the fields. The pastures on either side of the road turned green in a surrealistic fashion, monstrous, impeccable, as if they were holding their breaths. The roosters stopped. All things of the world, the fields and the fencing, the road, parked orange truck, were stricken and self-conscious. A world pressed down on their surfaces, a world battered just within their surfaces, and that real world so near to emerging had got stuck. There was only silence. It was the silence of matter caught in the act and embarrassed. There were no cells moving, and yet there were cells. I could see the shape of the land, how it lay holding silence. Its poise and stillness were unendurable, like the ring of the silence you hear in your skull when you're little, and you notice you're living, the ring which resumes later in life when you're sick. There were flies buzzing over the dirt by the henhouse, moving in circles and buzzing. Black dreams and chips off the one long dream, the dream of the regular world. But the silent fields were the real world, eternity's outpost in time, whose look I remembered but never like this God-blasted, paralyzed day. I felt myself tall and vertical in a blue shirt, self-conscious and wishing to die. I heard the flies again. I looked at the rooster, who was frozen, looking at me. Then at last I heard whistling, human whistling, far on the air, and I was not able to bear it. I looked around, heartbroken. Only at the big yellow Charolais farm, far up the road, was there motion. A woman, I think, dressed in pink, and pushing a wheelbarrow easily over the grass. It must have been she who was whistling and heaping on top of the silence those hollow notes of song. But the slow sound of the music, the beautiful sound of the music, ringing the air like a stone bell, was isolate and detached. The notes spread into the general air and became the weightier part of silence. Silence's last straw. The distant woman and her wheelbarrow were flat and detached, like mechanized and pink-painted properties for a stage. I stood in pieces, afraid I was unable to move. Something had unhinged the world. The houses and roadsides and pastures were buckling under the silence. Then a Labrador, black, loped up the distant driveway, fluid and cartoon-like toward the pink woman. I had to try to turn away. Holiness is a force, and like the others, can be resisted. It was given, but I didn't want to see it, God or no God. It was as if God had said, I am here, but not as you have known me. This is the look of silence and of loneliness unendurable. It too has always been mine, and now will be yours. I was not ready for a life of sorrow deriving from knowledge. I could just as well stop at the gate. I turned away, willful, and the whole show vanished. The realness of things disassembled. The whistling became ordinary, familiar. The air above the fields released its pressure, and the fields lay hooded as before. I myself could act. Looking to the rooster, I whistled to him myself, softly, and some hens appeared at the chicken house window, greeted the day, and fluttered down. Several months later, walking past the farm on the way to a volleyball game, I remarked to a friend by way of information, there are angels in those fields. Angels? That silence so grave and so stricken? That choked and unbearable green? I've rarely been so surprised at something I've said. Angels? What are angels? I'd never thought of angels in any way at all. From that time, I began to think of angels. I considered that sights such as I had seen of the silence must have been shared by the people who said they saw angels. I began to review the thing I'd seen that morning. My impression now of those fields is of thousands of spirits, spirits trapped, perhaps, by my refusal to call them more fully, or by the paralysis of my own spirit at that time. Thousands of spirits, angels, in fact, almost discernible to the eye, and whirling. If pressed, I would say they were 3 or 4 feet from the ground. Only their motion was clear, clockwise if you insist. That, and their beauty, unspeakable. There are angels in these fields, and I presume in all fields, and everywhere else. I would go to the lions for this conviction, to witness this fact. What all this means about perception, or language, or angels, or my own sanity, I have no idea. All right, so if we go back, did you notice while we were reading how many times silence or stillness or words with similar meanings were brought up? So her language and her word choice is creating that mood of stillness, of contemplation, of being arrested. But then there is, in contrast to that, some action. If we look at particularly the bottom of 102, when she's describing the fields or the pastures, she does talk about them being heaped with silence. But what's strange is the verbs that she chooses. They're really action words, which is a strange contrast to the sort of stillness and silence around her. So she says, the pastures were heaped with silence, heaped on the fields like trays. What do you think she means by that? Heaped like trays. That totally baffled me when I read this. I thought, I don't know what she's talking about. Any thoughts what she might have in mind there? Heaped with silence. It's a comparison, but what's she getting at?
Understand the last word on 102, pressure. Pressure is
Yeah.
that makes more sense
Yeah, you're right.
than heaped with.
Yeah.
But maybe she just meant there's a heaviness to some.
Yes, I think you're right. It's almost palpable or tangible. She can just feel the weight of the silence and that pressure, and it seems to be pressing down everything around her. So it's an experience, and she's searching for words for it. So she's straining language really to try to explain this moment of experiencing that weight of silence. Right. So she's thinking about that. If we look at page, the next page, the second paragraph, she says, I do not want, I think, ever to see such a sight again. That there's loneliness here I had granted in the abstract, but not, I thought, inside the light of God's presence. What do you think she means by that? Maybe. Yeah, there's kind of a contrast between kind of absence and presence, a kind of sensing and not sensing, right? In her human experience, at least in this moment. Yeah. But so she thinks that, maybe she's thought about God's presence and you know, in nature in a kind of abstract way, but she wasn't quite ready for this sudden sense of his being present, and yet she couldn't quite grasp it. She uses a lot of strange images too. We've got on the rest of that page 103, she talks about the not only the fields or the pastures, but the rooster. What do you get out of that image of the rooster? And lots of sense of his eye watching her.
She's unsettled by what she's experiencing, and maybe the rooster is like just a way to visualize the weirdness or
Yeah,
the unsettledness that she's feeling because the rooster is so weird and
yeah,
maniac her.
yeah, that's right. And reptilian almost. So yeah, this kind of strangeness, right? Like it's unsettling. I think that's a really good word because it's both familiar, you know, it's just an ordinary day, ordinary pastor, quiet day, and ordinary animals even, like the rooster, but something about it is strange and almost uncanny, familiar but unfamiliar at the same time.
People who grow up in the city really don't know what they're doing out in the countryside. I mean,
Maybe.
she grew up in
She was
Pittsburgh.
urban, yeah.
Her family owned the American Standard Company,
Right.
the toilet. She's a
Fixed.
toilet heiress.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Privileged, yeah,
Heiress,
obviously.
well,
Yeah.
but porcelain heiress, let's call it. But although I don't think her parents were actually in the direct line of the company, they were sort of like disconnected. But she came from a privileged background in Pittsburgh. And so what the heck is she doing out here on the Gulf Islands? You know, it's just like
It was
other
the
people who
70s.
are looking for something.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's a kind of searching, right? But not quite knowing what
you know
you're
what-
for, and not quite grasping or understanding this rural setting.
What grabbed me was the line, in and out and into human life's thin weave.
Mm.
Like the thin weave is like if she's experiencing our sense of reality and our as a weave, but she's feeling more like if you think of something that's been woven really loosely, there's more holes, there's more air than thread. And I think she's feeling the space between things.
Just kind of permeable, right?
Or maybe another way
Yeah,
is look at it,
loose.
or she's like a loose end in this weave. And she's feeling her like a thread that's out of place. I get this real strong sense of her not of silence, but of dislocation.
Weaving and
I just said that because that was my impression was, this is somebody who's used to living where there's lots of sound and they're uncomfortable when it's quiet. I mean, so I guess that was what was happening.
Yeah.
I'm the farm kid who was lived in this kind
yeah.
of silence
Mhm.
from my childhood, and it's not really silent.
No,
It only seems silent if you're used to much more sound.
Yeah.
I mean, she's got flies and she's got roosters, and there's probably a lot more that was there that she missed because her impression of it was so strong that it was silence. And I think both of you are right in the sense that the silence is her inwardness, her disconnection, more than it is her physical environment.
That
Anyway,
makes
that's it.
sense. That does make sense.
Well, I'm a city girl, but knows
Yeah.
nothing about farming. And when we came back from overseas, we stupidly agreed to live on a farm for 6 weeks while our friends were gone. Cattle or sheep. And the most lonely, silent time of my life was driving home from town with my load of groceries 2 days after we got there and seeing, oh, some poor sucker cows are out all over the road and I'm looking like, and those are our cows.
Oh,
And there's no one coming, and it's totally silent, and we have to figure, and I don't know where the dogs have gone, or the cows back in, and that's the most abandoned I think I've ever felt. So I identify with that feeling of silence seems overwhelming, because you're listening. No,
If it's, you're it, yeah,
You're it.
in this landscape. Interesting, yeah. And the idea of tapestry and weaving too is interesting because she does talk about the silence previously as being almost weighing on things like yard goods, which is odd too, but that's another fabric image, of bolts of cloth. And weaving is a traditional image for writing, for one thing, but also for human life, right? The tapestry of life, maybe, or the threads of life. Um, so yeah, she's getting at something there, and that space between, that's interesting. Like there's kind of you can see light passing through, right? If you look closely, or there's air passing through, there's something permeable, like it seems it's like kind of membrane, right? So she's feeling on the edge of something, maybe in the silence.
That's where I get when she starts into the angels. Before that, I was thinking that creepy. Yep. If I was in that scene, I'd have been agreeing to me and talking to God or just, yeah, just listening to all the sounds. But then all of a sudden she has the angels and where'd she get that?
Where'd that come from? Well, we'll come back to that.
You asked about the word trays,
Yeah.
and I was thinking of the weaving and looms stuff that you do loads of fabric, I think like trays into looms, so maybe there's, I was thinking like layers
Yeah.
when you were
Me
asking about
too.
the word tray, that's a part of weaving. So maybe it's.
Thank you. That is true. It sort of has different layers of meaning too, right? Different possibilities. Pardon my cold. Yeah, I think it has all of those meanings. There's layers that are unexpected and the fabric.
Yeah, and when she gets into this description of the cicadas or cicadas, there is no pattern nor sense to their mass stridulations. It's like weaving creates pattern,
Yeah,
but she can't make a pattern out of what she's seeing or hearing.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
So it's one of those experiences where you can't quite grasp and understand the experience in the moment. Pardon me. And you are looking for an interpretation of it,
Yeah.
which only comes later in reflection. Sorry, I've had a sore throat all week, but it was holding up.
If you spend most of your life surrounded by human-made objects, and you step out into a realm where most of what you're surrounded by has not been made by humans, it can be a little disorienting because the patterns that you're accustomed to, angles and shapes and
Yeah.
arches and grid roads and city streets and whatnot, isn't there.
No.
And so the transcendentalists and the romantics had this romantic notion of nature. But when they actually got there, nature can be quite frightening
Right.
because it's so vast and so, if you want, terrible. Walk into the mountains and you say, well, it's beautiful, but it's also terrible
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
and inhospitable in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
I can see the mountains being more silent than a farm, like on the bottom of 103. I think she's exaggerating.
Yeah.
Bashed her
Good point.
broadside.
Yes.
I lived on a farm. I don't forget well.
That wasn't your impression, but I was thinking it was interesting we were talking about those word choices again, those strong verbs. So the silence gathered and struck me in the third last line, and it bashed me, like you said. It choked the fields. And over the page in that same paragraph, we have other things were stricken by it, pressed down, battered, a world battered. So she's using all these strong verbs. And does it remind you of any of the other writers we looked at? Just struck me this way.
John Donne.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about batter my heart, three-person God, and the strong verbs. And even the description of the landscape of both the human and the natural sort of in harmony, but also in contrast and being held in tension is a bit like Hopkins. So I think there's this contemplative tradition that she's aware of, but probably only in retrospect, right? But I think that in the moment, it is this overwhelming kind of experience. Yeah, and she's not quite sure what to make of it. It's also interesting. I was thinking about Hopkins describing God as, and also of the other metaphysicals, and even Herbert, God as being active in nature. And if we think about, Romans 1, God reveals himself in nature and his perfect law. We have some understanding or intuition of it, even if we don't fully comprehend it without, say, the revelation of scripture. But there's something about God's presence written in nature that's perceptible, which I think she's trying to get at. If you turn over the page again to 104, in the second paragraph, or sorry, third paragraph, well, it's the second indentation from the top. She's the paragraph that's starting about the flies. There are flies buzzing. So sounds do interrupt the silence, as Del was mentioning and Tim. But if you look at the third line of that paragraph, she says, but the fields were the real world. So until now, she has thought of sort of the human, like the farm and the owners and the roosters and the chickens and the work they do and her reading. All those things were sort of the real world. But she's thinking now the silent fields were the real world. And she describes them as eternity's outpost in time. That's a kind of comparison. Any idea what she might be thinking of when she thinks of this field and this moment being eternity's outpost?
Well, I think it's like the Tolkien story, the terrible sharpness of reality. We live in an infinite universe, but it all comes down to a point in time, a point in space.
Just one point. And what is an outpost?
The last place before where you can get a good
A hot meal
hot meal.
for gas. Yeah, it's a kind of a settlement, perhaps, but usually on a frontier or a border, right? So it's like
Before you go
the
into-
edge. Yeah, yeah, that's right, the edge of something.
This
So,
is really,
yeah.
I see it as it's the place where the transcendent peeks through into our world that we observe.
Yeah,
So the eternity is beyond.
yeah.
But when we see things that approach timelessness in our material world, it gives us a clue. It's a little outpost for timelessness and eternity.
Yes, I think you're right. She's thinking the real is that eternity that we're somewhat unaware of, but we're living on the edge of it. And here they're almost touching, at least in her sense of the moment and her feelings at the time. So eternity is bordering on, but also beyond, but also in in our time, right?
Or past the outpost is danger. The outpost is where the last safety might be. So past that, who knows what's out there.
Yeah, and she does feel uncertain and kind of wary of the whole thing. She's not sure what to make of it. So it's exhilarating, but also a little frightening. Yeah, she's perceiving something. And then she talks about the day as being a God-blasted, paralyzed day. There's another strong verb, blasted. What do we usually think of something as being blasted or
Blasted heat.
yeah, a blasted meadow or field?
Oh, one that's been where all the trees are without leaves, you could, well, you could see like the fields of Flanders were blasted by war, but it can also be by the elements. It's
Or the empty heath in King Lear, I think about too sometimes. Just this, or if you think about wind blasted, that's what comes to my mind.
Yeah.
When I think of that, something that's exposed to the elements, exposed to something, I suppose, and it's another force, right? So it's that strong verb again.
another
But-
word for
But it's God doing the blasting. And I like to me, the connection with wind. Does the wind create any ideas of God's presence? What comes to mind if we put it together that way?
When you first said that part of that sentence, I thought she was swearing.
I know it almost sounds like it, right?
Well. Yeah. Like some people who use those words and
Yeah.
swearing, and so.
But I think she's using it literally here. Yeah. That verb. But maybe a God-filled day or a God breathed day. Or you think about Jesus talking about in John, the wind of the Spirit, that you know where you feel it, you see where it's come from, you feel its effects, but you don't know where it comes from or where it's going. So there's that mystery of God's presence, just like the wind. She feels it, but she can't even quite find words to describe it, and it's beyond her reason. So she feels kind of on the edge of something. Then if we have in the middle of that paragraph, now she's finding all this almost unbearable, but still drawing her, impressing itself on her. But then she starts to notice sounds. So again, we had the rooster's sound, but now we have a human sound, someone whistling, a woman. And in the middle of that paragraph, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 6 lines, 7 or 8 lines down. She says, the notes spread into the general air and became the weightier part of silence. Silence's last straw. And she reacts by saying, I stood in pieces if you skip a line. Unable to move. Something had unhinged the world. Why do you think this effect of hearing this sound suddenly has that paralyzing effect on her?
Rooted on whatever she's thinking. Skin. Yeah. Seems like it kind of jerked her back to reality unexpectedly.
I think you're right. So she's really being caught between two realities here, right? She's been sensing something of presence in this quiet and in this place, but she was longing for human contact and activity. And now that it comes, she's feeling a bit shattered because it made the rest kind of disappear. And same with the dog. This is in the last inch or so of that paragraph. Then a Labrador, black, loped up the distant driveway, fluid and cartoon-like toward the pink woman. Why do you think she describes the dog as being fluid and cartoon-like? Odd description.
A little bit more economical. Great.
Yeah, a little bit disjointed, a little unreal, maybe, right? So it is that sense of like what Sue was saying, breaking into what she was thinking, that meditative space that she seemed to be in. So it doesn't seem quite real. Before, it was the physical world that seemed real. And now it's the presence that seems real, and the physical world seems a little surreal. It's something's happened with her perception. It's changed.
She described the rooster very funny, or very bizarrely.
Yeah.
Described the dog as
Yeah,
or other world.
she does have that penchant for quirky facts or quirky ways of thinking and describing things, for sure. And then if she does start thinking about the loneliness as being unendurable, but also there's kind of a struggle going on inwardly about whether she regrets that sense of things dissolving or not. So at the bottom of 104, she says, I turned away, willful, and the whole show vanished. So the moment, the scene, that sense of some kind of presence or eternity being near suddenly vanishes. She says the realness of things disassembled, it's sort of dissolved. So now all of a sudden she's sort of back in the ordinary world. The whistling became ordinary, familiar, and so on. And at the top of 105, she finds herself now able to act rather than being paralyzed or arrested by the silence and the impressions that she was gathering. And then she sees the rooster again and whistles to him. That's interesting.
Sounds to me like someone in a sensory deprivation chamber,
Interesting.
where you're alone in a dark, quiet place, and the rest of the world, although she's very present in her environment, nevertheless, she's experiencing the sort of thing that a person, it's especially when, when she talks about God, she mentions God a few times.
Yeah.
But you just get a nominal sense of God. God is more of a
A mystery.
not so much a reality. She said, I didn't want to see it, God or no God. It was as if God had said, I am here, but not as you have known me. This look of silence and of loneliness, unendurable. It too has always been mine, and now will be yours. That's pretty forlorn, a pretty bleak understanding or view of God, and that's going to affect the way she's relating to everything else. I think this is an experience. I think every person, especially every young person today living in the city, should spend a summer out on a farm. And it would be, if you're used to living in the city with all the noise, then having that experience would be almost equivalent, I think, of a sensory deprivation chamber in which you're out of your natural environment and now you're in a totally different place where you have to experience yourself in a way that you never had to experience yourself or your environment before, and that could be quite I think, even in her experience, quite scary.
Yeah, I think that's really well put. And the idea of the sensory deprivation chamber, it is that sense of heightened perception or heightened awareness, right?
And all kinds of things come
Because other
out
things are suppressed.
out of your psyche,
Yeah.
out of your subconscious, your unconscious, that have an impact on your everyday life. But it takes something like this for those things to come out. She's sounds like a pretty lonely person.
The loneliness is the background here. So the presence or the attempt at, and the beginning of sensing a presence that she hadn't noticed before is interesting. This is what's, I think, arresting to her.
She goes on to talk of angels, not real angels, but visionary or
Yeah.
mystery.
Hold on to that for a moment, because I do like that you brought out on the bottom of 104, that sense of holiness is a force. So that goes back to those strong verbs, arresting her, uh, making her unable to move. She's kind of caught up in the moment. But she still has free will. It can be resisted. And then when she talks about God, she does say, it was as if God had said, I am here, but not as you have known me. What do you think? Why would that be significant to her? I'm here, but not as you have known me.
On page 103,
Yeah.
observance of God's the light of God's presence. And I was thinking, I inferred that like that's a sort of good thing.
Yes.
And then she's experiencing God's presence with sorrow. I was not ready for a life of sorrow.
Mm.
It seems like God is imparting to her God's sorrow, and that was in contrast to God's light.
Yeah.
Maybe knew it at a surface level, but this has really put her deeper. Whatever. I mean, this doesn't. This is. Not, I mean, can't tell if. I think this was a bad experience or I don't know, not bad. But
When she struggles to
said
understand,
that never wanted that again.
challenging. Yeah.
I think it's like the cows and the fence. Like the light of God's presence as she understood it was sort of like being in that fenced area that was safe and the cows were where they needed to be. But the fence only appeared to be there. Remember, the fence wasn't really fixed. It only was fixed enough to look like it was fixed. And what she's happened in this story is she's seen that she's gone beyond the fence. She's
Yeah.
she's now off the farm
Yeah.
into the whatever that experience of.
It seems to be an encounter with God and an encounter with God's presence that's new to her, right?
Yeah.
And not what she expected.
Beyond the kind of fence of her
Yeah. Her
old understanding.
usual life. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
which
right.
had its patches and
Yeah.
budges.
So it's as if God is drawing her into some other experience. And she does seem to have two responses to this. One initially in the moment when she is feeling sorrow and loneliness and confusion and a little bit of fear, even and uncertainty. But then later in reflecting on that experience, she comes up with a different understanding. That's when she gets into the angel's part. So let's go to page 105 then, to that angel's part.
We
She's,
go there, and I was,
yeah, sure.
her tentative understanding, as if God had said,
As if,
but then talks about loneliness. And so we don't usually think of God being lonely
yeah, it's
or sorrowful. And yet there's some theological justification for expecting. Jesus wept over Jerusalem because he wanted to gather them and they wouldn't gather. So there's loneliness in the heart of God for his people, I think. And so her vision here is what a wonderful way to connect with the Creator, to recognize a shared experience. I feel lonely and sorrowful. What if my God feels lonely and sorrowful? We have something in common.
yeah, I think so. And God spoke to Job in the whirlwind, right? In the whirlwind in 38. So there is something of that. I think you're right. So hold on to that idea. And then we have several months later on to 105, walking past the farm on the way to a volleyball game, so her ordinary life again, I remarked to a friend, there are angels in those fields. And then she was shocked at herself for saying that. And toward the end, she talks about the angels. She felt as though they were 3 or 4 feet from the ground, moving clockwise, maybe a little bit like a whirlwind again, right? And a beauty unspeakable. What do you think she's getting at there? Like, I don't know if there were real angels there or not, but what is she trying to capture?
I was thinking about going back to the weave, that these are the angels spinning You know, everything on a loom spins. You know, the bobbins and and wool and fibers are spun. And I feel like these angels are respinning for her the thread and the weave of reality,
Hmm, okay.
or the wire of the fence.
Interesting. I was thinking about Psalm 29. It's Psalm 29, verse 9. The voice of the Lord causes the oaks to whirl and strips the forest bare. In his temple, all say glory. I think that word whirling has some kind of mystical, religious sense of God's presence, right? We're seeing trees whirl or angels. But she has a sense that language, maybe a bit like the metaphysical poets and human reason, can't fully grasp God or his presence or his character. And she's struggling both to perceive it and also to articulate it. And so the closest she can come to at this moment, as she reflects back on it, is a sense that there were angels in these fields. There's some kind of supernatural presence, and there's some kind of praise or some kind of glory there that she's struggling to grasp. And we're left at the end with her saying what all this means about perception, human perception, or language, or angels, or my sanity. I have no idea. She leaves us with that sense of uncertainty. What do you think is her purpose in leaving it open-ended like that?
I can just encounter holiness and being transformed by it, not transformed, but being changed by it somehow. Because it's transcended. How do you put words around that?
So well put. I think you're right. A sense of transcendence, but it's almost unspeakable. It's hard to find words to express it, but she feels changed somehow by that encounter, that experience with God's presence. How do you think that touches the loneliness that she started out with? And what Del was saying about sensing that maybe there's a loneliness in God's own spirit that she can relate to. Does it change somehow her idea of what loneliness or presence are?
Well, she's sharing the story with us. You know, so it is about, and that's the fundamental act of community, to tell this story, and so that you can share her perceptions and her what what sense she has made or failed to make out of her experiences. But that's the, again, that's the communication that I think she wants.
Yeah,
That's the end of the loneliness, is to be able to share this.
yeah.
I get the impression that she's had a mystical experience, but she didn't even think of it in those terms until reflecting back on it.
I think you're right.
And so then the language that came almost surprising her was angels.
Yes.
And so it's like, it's maybe the easiest way of putting some kind of label on that mystical experience.
I think you're right.
Especially in a secular society,
It's hard to articulate because it's not taken seriously sometimes.
And I think it could be the same for us in our lives. We have an experience we think is an experience of this world, but looking back, there may be clues that it was more than what we originally thought. One other thing I noticed most of it's about this thing, the metaphor is about silence and sounds. But she mentions color in relationship to the creatures.
Yeah, that's true.
The rooster is red,
Yeah.
she is wearing blue,
Yeah,
the lady is wearing pink,
yeah,
and the dog is black.
yeah.
So there's all of a sudden, there's some, her main thing is about this experience, this silence. But then color pops in, a whole nother dimension
Yeah.
that's assigned to the oddities in this eternal thing, which is the living beings. I don't know.
I think she is inviting us into that experience of wonder, right? And reflection on what does it mean to think of God's presence in nature, in our lives. How is the material world that we take as reality? How is that in relation? How do we understand it in relation to eternity or experiences we can't quite articulate of God's presence or even of angels? And I think she's drawing us in by leaving us with that sense of wonder to contemplate God's transcendence and yet presence. That paradox that I think some of the poets we were looking at were getting at. It's paradoxical in Hopkins, present and absent at the same time. And it leaves us with that sense of wonder, in Hopkins' case of praise. But it's a greater reality that we are grasping to understand. And it can transform our loneliness into a kind of solitude. And maybe that's the kind of loneliness that God expresses in scripture at times, is solitude, not the kind of sorrow and painful loneliness, but the kind that creates wonder and potential connection.
Maybe this is reading too much into it, but building on what you said about sharing this story with us. See, the idea of angels comes when she was asking a very prosaic situation of like walking to volleyball with a friend, and he's talking to a friend and saying it. So I wonder if that sense of community is what prompts this sort of reflection to happen.
Good point.
Yeah,
Points of
angels
connection.
are messengers. I mean, their whole role is communication.
Points of connection, potential for connection, sharing this experience. Good.
I'm thinking this would be a good thing to look at camp. Because that's the kind of thing I think kids experience at camp. They're separated from their families and their normal environment, and they lots of it see different views of God or different spiritual insights when away from normal.
Yeah. Sometimes we need to be detached from our regular reality and assumptions and busyness in order to be able to perceive God differently. I was going to say, do you have moments that you can share of times when you experienced God's transcendence? Perhaps in nature? Well, camp was a good one. Maybe we'll leave it there and I'll leave you to keep thinking. Or Eric,
To speak to that point, about 25 years ago, I was coming to understand silence as a spiritual discipline. And so I incorporated that into a camp I was directing. In the past years, we always had worship music playing in the breaks on loudspeakers out at camp. So there was always music, worship music. But in this case, he decided that we would just have it for like before church, like for worship music for church. And that would be it. And they couldn't use their devices. And the kids were really like this for a while.
Yeah.
But as the days went by, and they were supposed to spend 15 minutes in silence with just the Bible and themselves. So that was part of it. But then a group, we were renting the camp, and a group came in from a neighboring camp, just a regular secular camp, and they brought in big sound system because they wanted to rent the pool. And so there's this blasting contemporary music, and the kids were coming to me and saying, they're ruining camp. So it took 6 or 7 days for them to begin to appreciate silence.
Something
So
different.
just to your point, you know,
Yeah, the discipline of silence is a good point. Transforming it to solitude. So, thank you. Well, I'll leave it there for
The
today.
first couple of days, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And keep on thinking and talking about these experiences as we approach Easter. Thank you for sharing and appreciated all of our discussions together. It made it richer.
Thanks. Good. Last.
This is our last day. Yeah. Stay tuned for what comes next in Learning for Life.